Okay, I'm going to walk you through the peel for your two Gothic stories, which is A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor and A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner, which we finished this week. I know that I have mentioned this last week about Reconstruction era and kind of how the characters of the grandmother and Miss Emily Grierson resist change, that they like to hold on to their old ways, to the traditions, right? And that's what you're essentially going to be talking about in your peel. So it's a comparative analysis of societal decay and the loss of traditional values represented in those characters. So here's your actual prompt, and I'm reading from the peel, like my computer's right here. How do the characters in each story reflect or resist the changing moral landscape of their respective communities? It says, write a comparative analysis discussing the parallels in character motivations, narrative structure, and the author's use of symbolism to convey the erosion of social norms and the consequences of isolation. I think really the biggest thing that I want you to focus on, especially in that link portion, is that there's an erosion of social norms and the consequences of isolation. Kind of like what we were talking about in the pre-reading activity for Miss A Rose for Emily, or ARF. So let me walk you down through this since I'm not here, and then we will go over it together on Monday, is my thought, since I'm not able to help you individually. Okay, so the first thing that you can do is similar to what we did last with the psychological peel. You can either say both of the authors' names. You can give the title of both of the short stories. One or the other, you don't have to do both. And then you can, for the second half of your sentence, use the reflect or resist the changing moral landscape of their respective communities. Like, you can use that. So let's do that. Okay, let's see. This would be your P. Can you see that? Am I in the frame? Yeah, you can see it. Okay. In the P, and I'll leave this up on the board too. You'll see in O'Connor, I'll use their names. O'Connor and Faulkner's stories both protagonists, even though we're not really rooting for them, protagonists, they're the main characters, we'll call them that, both protagonists. And then this is where you would fit in the first part of the resist the changing moral landscape of their respective community. All right, so that would be the rest of the prompt would fit into this. I'm going to put ellipses, and you can mark that in on your own. ... Okay, so now we get into the E, right? So the E is two-parted, right? Because we've got two stories. Now, you don't have to use two pieces of evidence, but you do need to talk about both stories and their protagonists. So we can start with, let's start with O'Connor's, right? So we'll start with the grandmother in O'Connor's story, and I'll let you finish from there. So the grandmother in O'Connor's story. And then here's where you would tell me about how she resists the changing moral landscape, the change in general. So think about every time that she consistently remarks about poor attitudes and poor manners and low class and the present times. And she says, back in my day, right? That's what you want to talk about. You want to give me a sentence or two with that starter that says this is, that's what her deal is with the changing moral landscape. Okay, so after you do that, then you want to give me a sentence or two about Miss Emily Grierson, all right? I'm going to call her Miss Emily because I feel like that's how they refer to her in the story. So instead of writing out her full name. So same thing. This is another extension of E. Miss Emily in Faulkner's story Okay, now same type of setup with this one, All right, and I gave you the ellipses over here. The glare is kind of, you'll see it. How does she resist change? Think about every time that she isolates herself, and she is a recluse, right? She never comes out of her house, doesn't pay the taxes, that type of stuff. So you need to explain, doesn't respond when people are upset about the smell around her house too, which we know that that's decaying body, right? Bodies, maybe. But that's essentially what's going on with her. So you need to tell me about that. Now, I'm going to add a little something to this peel that we didn't do last time. I would like for you guys, you could still only do one quote, but I want a sentence after the quote that comments on both of the protagonists in both stories. All right. So I want something along the lines of both characters resist change and deny any responsibility for something along those lines. All right. Because I feel like that's what we were missing in our last peel. So I'm going to get you set up with a quote. All right. And I'll get you set up with your link, but your L or your link is going to have two parts, right? One where you're going to tell me about how both characters resist the change or you're finding that commonality. And then one where you talk about social isolation, all right? Because that is really at the heart of both. The grandmother's worried about being alone. That's why she goes on the trip. The Miss Emily, on the other hand, like feeds into the isolation. Okay, so let's start with a quote. So here's your P, E. Oh my God, this marker sucks. I don't have time for this. Let's try this one. All right. I don't even know. Grandmother O'Connor's story was Emily Faulkner's story. This is shown. This one kind of sucks too. This is shown when character's name. Be specific, especially because we're talking about two character name. When I don't know, when they do something and then you have to explain it. This is shown when character's name says or does, then give the quote. Okay, and then this is probably outside of the frame, but you'll see it on the board. But make sure that you give the author's last name, whoever's name it is, O'Connor or Faulkner, and they both came with page numbers. And be careful about Faulkner's page numbers too, because they actually were like 300 something, right? Let me see. Yeah, 351 up top. So just watch that. All right, it's whatever the document itself is, not necessarily how many pages there are. Yes, there's only 7. I know there's not 300 in front of you, but okay. So it'll be last name, page number. You know the drill about that. Okay, so now we get into the L, right? The length. Tell me what both characters do. All right, so both characters resist what? And really what I'm asking you is to talk about, what do they resist? They resist change. How do they do it? What's similar about both of them? They isolate themselves, right? And so then here's your second part of your L. This is it's a pretty good sized peel, really, when you think about it, because we have a lot to talk about. And we didn't really, this has been kind of broken up over multiple days, so. Okay, both characters resist, whatever the change and responsibility of the changing times. They don't care about anybody other feelings. And then the last part that I want you to talk about is symbolism, right? Yep. So, and then let's bring the authors back in. It's always a good idea to bring your authors back in and focus on their purpose, right? Because that's essentially what we're getting at, is POV in this one. So, you can say both authors. Oh my Lord. I don't have patience for that either. Get out of here. All right. Man, I need new markers. Okay, both authors. How would I word that? Yeah, let's say we'll say narrative structure. It's basically how the book or the stories are laid out, right? So, and I think that's what we focused on most, even if you didn't realize you were doing that. That's what you were doing. Both authors use narrative. Oh my Lord, these markers suck. Narrative structure. Oh, brother, this guy stinks. What am I supposed to do now? Okay, well, whatever. Okay, both authors use narrative structure to comment on, oh, it's getting worse. Comment on, oh my Lord. Yeah. All right, well, that's all I got. What does it comment on? It comments on social isolation. It talks about the changing times, human experience, those type of things. Sound good? Okay. Give it your best shot, okay? And then we'll look at it on Monday when I am alive. All right. Bye.